Greetings moviegoers, I am the host, and it's that time once again to crank out our end of the year list for some of the very best and absolute worst films of 2013. And today we're going to take a look at the latter, but before we get into that, let's take a quick look at some of the films that weren't bad enough to make it onto the list, but are still pretty bad in their own right. These are my dishonorable mentions. In alphabetical order, we have The Call, the Halle Berry suspense thriller that completely lacked both suspense and thrills. Next is Dark Skies. Don't remember it? Maybe this might refresh your memory. That's pretty much exactly how I felt watching the movie. And while we're at it, let's put some Queen in that clip. G.I. Joe Retaliation, the unwanted sequel to one of the worst films of 2009, The Hangover Part 3, the final nail in the coffin to a franchise that never should have existed in the first place, Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, the 3D reimagining of the classic Grimm's fairy tale that I think everyone involved with it should wisely scratch off their film resumes, Now You See Me, the magician caper with an intriguing build-up that ultimately leads to one of the dumbest plot twists I've seen in a very long time, Percy Jackson's Sea of Monsters, another unwanted follow-up to a mediocre predecessor, The Purge, a home invasion thriller with a very cool sounding premise that sadly the film is too dumb to realize, Red 2, another cinematic turkey starring Bruce Willis that of course won't be his last on here, and finally White House Down, the latest action romp from director Roland Emmerich that definitely felt like sloppy seconds to the other White House thriller, Olympus Has Fallen. Now that we have all that settled, let's move on to the top 10 worst films of 2013. Number 10. Movie 43, the infamous anthology of outrageously offensive sketches starring a buttload of celebrities, has been universally despised by practically every living thing on the planet Earth, one of which called it the Citizen Kane of awful, and I'd be lying if I said I couldn't agree more. So why is it so low on the list, you might ask? Well, again, being perfectly honest, I did find the first few sketches genuinely funny. I'm sorry, but it's true. The minute Hugh Jackman showed up with a sack of balls on his throat, the only impulse I could muster up was complete laughter. But for the rest of the segments that followed, the film quickly turned from being a simple guilty pleasure to unspeakable pain and agony. The racist basketball and superhero speed dating sketches were definitely bad, but the one that takes the cake of sheer god-awfulness would have to be the one featuring a jealous cartoon cat named Beazle. What makes it even more depressing was that this short in particular was directed by James Gunn, the same man who did movies like Slither, Super, and this summer's upcoming Guardians of the Galaxy. If that's not enough to get you crying in the fetal position during a cold shower, well, maybe my 9 other picks will. Number 9. 47 Ronin. I've been going to the movies for as long as I can remember, and I have never fallen asleep during a movie, no matter how bad it got. But with this one, I came pretty damn close. Seriously, it's a samurai epic with a fire-breathing dragon. How the f*** do you make that boring? Well, if I had to pinpoint the main reason why it's so painfully dull, would probably be the main person in this, Keanu Reeves. Whoa. I don't think he's ever given a performance that felt more like drying paint than he does in this. Every time he's up on screen, he's like a human tranquilizer dart, ready to put me to sleep. Next one. Number 8. The Host. And if you're thinking about the 2006 South Korean monster movie, you'd be wrong, but still be an awesome person for bringing it up. Seriously, more people need to watch that. Anyways, this is the latest romantic snooze fest from the hack author of Twilight, Stephenie Meyer, but instead of employing vampires and werewolves, she uses aliens for yet another half-assed love triangle. But what's so strange about it is that there's a lot of great talent behind it, like Saoirse Ronan, William Hurt, Diane Kruger, and most shocking of all, Andrew Niccol, the writer and director of one of the best science fiction movies of the past 2 decades, Gattaca. How a man like that can make a film with less substance in it than dried up fruit that moves slower than a snail race, I will never know. But what I do know is that this film is a disgrace to everything I love about the genre, and it's the absolute worst thing Stephenie Meyer has ever done. Yes, it's even worse than the Twilight franchise. Think about that. Number 7. The Lords of Salem. I never really considered myself a loyal follower of Rob Zombie's work, but I did enjoy films like House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects enough to get myself stoked to see his latest horror extravaganza. And if you thought his Halloween renditions were terrible, then you are in for a treat. The plot of this movie, or lack thereof, involves a small group of reincarnated witches wanting revenge on the small town that burned them alive, and somehow Sherry Moon Zombie gets involved and she's sporting dreadlocks and weird makeup. It's a mess from start to finish. Now, I could entirely be wrong about this, but when I saw this back at South by Southwest, I could have sworn I saw Rob Zombie himself sitting near the front row and walking out near the 20-minute mark, possibly for getting mad at the snickering and groaning audience. Well, if there's anyone at all he should be mad at, it should be himself for making such pretentious Kubrick wannabe bullshit. So please do us all a kindness, Mr. Zombie, and stop making movies and stick with the music industry for the love of God. Or in your case, Satan. Number 6. R.I.P.D. My God, what an atrocity this was. Aside from being an obvious ripoff of Men in Black, R.I.P.D. is a 90-minute motion picture featuring poorly written dialogue, unexciting thrills, and some of the worst CGI you'll ever witness. Jeff Bridges is definitely trying and seems to be having fun doing so, but still fails to both save this film and have any on-screen chemistry with its co-star, Ryan Reynolds. Yeah, for those excited to see the dude partake in comedic bantering with the Green Lantern, will be mightily disappointed. I said this once before and I'll gladly say it again, R.I.P.D. is nothing but pure S-H-I-T. Number 5. After Earth. Okay, you remember what I said about Rob Zombie? I take it all back. M. Night Shyamalan should be the one to stop making movies. It's like every time he makes a film featuring a big name actor, he somehow manages to strip away their on-screen talent and charisma, and the Smith family are his latest victims. But to be fair, Will Smith did think up the story for this and therefore shares equal blame. As for his son Jaden, here's some advice. Never ever take direction from a guy who thought The Wind would be a great villain for a horror movie. Ugh, that was stupid. So if you're thinking this is the absolute worst film Shyamalan has ever done, trust me when I say that he's done far worse. Number 4. The Lone Ranger. For me, I never grew up watching the classic black and white serials, so the only recollection I have for The Lone Ranger was the William Tell Overture and, well, this. Hey-ho, Silver, away! So I went into this with hardly any expectations. And man, did this one suck. It's just absolutely baffling to me that Disney, the same company who funded one of the biggest box office bombs of all time, spend almost the exact same amount of money on this, thinking it would be a hit. This movie was in desperate need for a lot of things. A proper script, a better lead, and most of all, a very tight edit. Because unless you're making a historical biopic, which this certainly isn't, 2.5 hours is way too f***ing long for a movie like this. I mean, I've seen 4.5 hour long movies that breeze by than this misguided turkey. Where's the remote? I had enough of this. Number 3. Identity Thief. Ever since her breakout role in Bridesmaids, Melissa McCarthy has been appearing in quite a few notable comedies. But instead of starring in smartly written films that showcase the best of her comedic abilities, she winds up headlining Drek like this. Here, McCarthy plays a sneaky con artist who steals businessman Jason Bateman's identity, forcing him to travel to her location to take her to custody. Why the police don't get involved? It's just a poor and quite frankly stupid excuse to make a road trip movie featuring two people who can't stand each other that, ironically, we can't stand either. There was nothing about this premise I found remotely funny. If anything, I felt pretty angry watching this movie, especially towards McCarthy's character, who is such a deplorable person that the film had to make up on the spot a reason why you should like her. It's disgustingly manipulative and unpleasant to watch, and the fact that this was a huge hit at the box office adds even more insult to injury. But I gotta look on the bright side. It could have been a whole lot worse, just like my next two picks. Number 2. Grown Ups 2. For the past few years, Adam Sandler's movies have managed to make it to the top of my worst of the year list. So in a weird sort of way, Grown Ups 2 is a slight improvement. Yay for him. It feels almost pointless to say how lazy, offensive, and unfunny Sandler's films have gotten over the years, and it's most likely he'll continue churning out more of these so-called comedies and make millions off his questionably loyal fans until the day he either dies of natural causes or is killed by a group of rage-infected monkeys, thus becoming patient zero for the long-awaited zombie apocalypse. Where was I again? And the number 1 worst film of 2013 is A Good Day to Die Hard. I've had my fair share of seeing beloved nostalgic film franchises reduced to nothing more than cheap, gimmicky cash grabs, but none of them made me feel so angry and pissed off than seeing what has become of the Die Hard series. John McClane is no longer a regular guy that most of us could relate to, as he has now been downgraded to being a cartoon superhero who can survive a massive car pileup without getting a scratch on him and kill about 100 people with not a care in the world. Just by looking at Bruce Willis's facial expressions, you could tell how tired and bored he is playing this character, and the chemistry he has with his co-star Jai Courtney, apparently playing his son in the film, is so non-existent that it's making Will and Jaden Smith's performances in After Earth look Oscar-worthy. This movie barely constitutes itself as a movie, let alone a Die Hard movie, because of how awfully written, horrendously edited, and obnoxiously repetitive it all is. A Good Day to Die Hard, the worst movie of 2013. And those were my top 10 worst picks of 2013. Do you agree or disagree? Leave a comment below and let me know what you personally thought were the worst films of last year. Keep an eye out for the next video I'll be doing, which will be the top 10 best films of 2013, but until then, I'm the host saying thanks for watching.